What's up, guys? It's three-time NFL Pro Bowler, all-decade return specialist, Josh Cribbs. I want to welcome you to the College Sports Connection podcast, where Double A, Alex, and AJ host the Mid-American Conference best.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the College Sports Connection podcast. I'm your host, Alex the Captain. Joining me as always, it's AJ the Guru.
What's going on, everybody?
AJ, welcome back. We had a great interview just a couple weeks ago with Coach Becky Burke out of Buffalo. This week, we're switching gears to a completely different sport. Why don't you tell everybody who we got on the show tonight?
Yeah, absolutely. Today, we welcome on to the show who just completed her first full season in Akron, coaching the women's cross-country team and finished third place this past fall in the MAC Cross-Country Championships, 12th out of 31 teams. At the Great Lakes Regional, hailing from Rochester, Indiana, Coach Anna Bears. Coach, welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you guys for having me.
Yes. So, Coach, before we get into the heavy stuff here, like I told you before we got on the air here, you and I are going to become best friends because in doing my research, I saw that you're a Rochester Zebra.
Yes, Rochester Zebras. We had actually zebra striped uniform tops that we only got to wear at our special postseason races for cross country and track.
Sure.
Yes, go Zebras.
Well, that's funny because I'm a Plymouth Rocky / Pilgrim.
No way. Rivals just down the road. Yeah.
Just down the road. Yes. And so I graduated in 2011.
Okay.
And so I was long gone, but I'm sure you and I have some friends in common, to say the least. There's
yes.
I mean, it's a very small, Fulton County, Mark County, it's pretty much in one. So we definitely have friends in common, but I saw that, I go, this is it's a small world, especially in sports, which I'm sure you've realized is getting smaller and smaller by the minute.
Yes, absolutely. No, that's cool.
That's cool. So I'm sure you've ran in Plymouth then, because we played in Rochester football. We're there every year. So I'm sure you ran in Plymouth and stuff like that. So it was always fun though. I've competed against the local teams.
What's the name of the park that they have their home cross country course on? I remember competing there and then at their track.
Yeah, is it the Country Club, the golf course, right?
I believe so. That sounds
the Country Club. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think there's still
the infamous Blueberry Stomp.
Yeah, the Blueberry Stomp. Yes, which I have yet to run in my 30 years of existence, and I never will. But my wife and my dad ran it last year, and they, I think that was the first year they've had it back since COVID, and there was a ton of people. So it was nice to see a lot of people running. But that's great though. It's cool to see a local talent, local people make it big and coach, and so we're excited to get into that. I think it's really cool, especially for a community like Rochester, to have somebody like you representing them on a bigger scale.
Oh, thank you.
So let's stick with Rochester there for a second. You were a 2-year Leonard winner in cross country and track and field in high school. As a senior, you were the first athlete in school history to win a sectional and regional championship. That has to be pretty special, knowing you're the first to do that in the history of the program.
We're going way back.
A little bit, a few years.
Yeah. No, so I started school in Rochester, moved away and went to school in Warsaw, Indiana for a few years. Mm-hmm. And then when I went back to Rochester for my junior and senior year of high school, it felt like going home, because that's, where the early part of my upbringing happened. And being able to compete in cross country and track for Rochester under the coach. He's moved on now, but Scott Stahlbaum. He was one of the key mentors I had early in my running career, and then obviously in my coaching career as well. So it was fun to run under him and learn under him. And then I guess won some races, ran all right, did some cool things for the program. So I look back fondly on the couple of years that I got to do that and have those experiences.
Sure. When did that running bug, kind of creep into you? Because it's one of those things where I think running's kind of either you're born with it or you're not. And so just one day you tried it and fell in love with it, I'm assuming?
Well, see, it started, I was one of those kids with way too much energy and was way too competitive. So everything I did, I wanted to win. And running was one of the first things that I realized I could win at. I think it was like the middle school when you have to do like the timed half mile or the timed mile, whatever it is, competitions. And not only did I beat all the girls, but I also would beat all the boys. And that was, I was competitive. So I liked it. And I think that's kind of how it was when I started running. Was I don't know that I necessarily loved running right from the get-go, but I did love winning. And then as, you kind of grow up and grow into the sport, I think it was, end of middle school, early high school, when I realized that it was more than just the success that I liked. It was the sport itself and all the other benefits that come with it. The life lessons, the teammates, the fitness that you get out of it. So all that, I would say it started with just being too competitive, and then it just transformed into a lifestyle, I think.
Sure.
It's
so funny too, you bring up like the competition part, because you, like me, we played the same team. I live in Fort Wayne now, so I'm not far from Warsaw, and grew up playing against Warsaw and whatnot. And this whole area is just so competitive. I mean, you have South Bend schools, our area, the competition is always top notch. And so it's a little more special when you win, especially against the talent that we have in this area.
Yeah, no, it's that north central part of the state. It's, really deep for the, the quality of athletes that it pumps out into collegiate programs, across a wide spectrum of sports. And I think that growing up as part of Indiana distance running was also, special in its own way too. Something that's unique about Indiana is that the cross country and track and field it's the one class system in high school. And most states, they divide it into, big schools, medium schools, small schools, or, however many classes that they have. And so I think it, dilutes a little bit, when you get into postseason, the weight behind winning a state title, or, qualifying for state. And in Indiana, when it's all one go, it gave an opportunity for a girl from like me, from a small school, a small town, to compete against the best, the athletes from the bigger high schools and, the powerhouse, programs, which, so again, the area did have a lot of quality athletes. And then I think just the nature of, Indiana high school track and field and cross country, it also promoted, a special experience.
Sure. So that's interesting that you talk about it being a one class system. I imagine from the coaching side that makes recruiting a little bit easier. But as an athlete, that probably makes being recruited a little bit easier, because everybody's getting to see everybody and not just the students from the big schools. They're not just going to watch, class 1, class 2, class 3. They're getting to watch everybody. So that probably has to make that a lot easier all around.
It does, especially, going through my first high school postseason track and field in the state of Ohio, when I'm, poking my eyeballs out trying to figure out which district and division, all the different athletes are in, and the host sites for all of them. Yes, it does. It's significantly easier in Indiana, where it's just the sectional, regional, state final. Everybody, like I said, in the same class. And then as an athlete too, it's special. Even if you talk to athletes from the smaller schools, they don't want it to be broken up into different classes, for the most part, because then when you do qualify for state as a team from a small school or an athlete from a small school, there's a special significance to that. So I think from a college coach recruiting perspective, it's easier to sift through results in Indiana. And then I think as an athlete too, it probably does make it easier to get the attention of colleges. And like I've already said, it adds to the experience in general. Sure. I think.
And I think that's one sport here in Indiana in particular, track across the country, that's starting to take off a little bit more. Because I threw shot and disc my senior year, not knowing it. I'd never done track before, so I wanted to try something different. So I did it, really enjoyed it, but I didn't know a whole lot about it. Now I think you mentioned the smaller schools who don't have football programs or baseball programs. A lot of those kids get into running, and they're starting to become like the Arguses of the world. You're not too far from Rochester. Those schools don't have football, and so they have soccer and they have running. And that's just about it. And then baseball, I think maybe sometimes, I don't know. They alternate that every couple of years, it seems like. But nevertheless, a lot of the small schools have running programs that are being extremely competitive when it comes to state. Now, when you went to state, was that down at IU?
Yes, it was.
Yeah, talk about another incredible facility too to run at.
Yeah, no, it's a beautiful venue, and obviously Bloomington itself is an incredible city. We took that's where the East preliminary round is going to be held this year for track, and then we were lucky enough to take a group of athletes down to a meet that IU hosted in in April to compete. And it was special because it did kind of feel a little bit like going home. And obviously there's, the nostalgia that kind of comes with being, back at that facility, in that environment. So yeah, it was, great to have an opportunity to compete there as an athlete. And fun that, now that I'm, back in this part of the Midwest, able to take athletes there to compete. And yeah, current phase. So, yeah.
Sure. So you talked about, coach or recruiting, especially coming to Indiana, being able to watch one class. How were you able to get noticed? Because you went out west to Tulsa and then came back home. So how were you able to catch the eyes of those coaches out there being here in the Midwest?
Yeah, well, I really was a late bloomer in the sport. If you look at my marks from my, freshman, sophomore, even into my junior year, I was running decent in cross country, but the times I was posting on the track, somewhat due to injury, somewhat due to just, having a lot to learn still. It wasn't anything that was getting big attention and, big draws from schools that I was interested in. But I think I kind of always had the mentality that, I wanted to be really good, thought I had what it took to be really good. And just with, misfires with injury and whatnot, felt like I hadn't quite gotten to the level that I wanted to be at going into college. The University of Tulsa was a program that was, willing to communicate with me, have conversations with me before I got good on the track. And so I committed to run there after, I think it was just during my senior cross country season. So senior high school cross country season, committed to run at Tulsa, under the, them just sort of being willing to take a chance on a, girl that, said the right things on the phone and had big goals. And, just the hope that I would be someone that could, develop in time, in the program there that, Steve and Taylor Goalie run. And then it was my senior track season, had been healthy, and, the marks that posted on the track then kind of finally caught up a little bit with, where I'd hoped to be at the end of my, high school running endeavor. And I think I reached out to Tulsa, and then they were just one of the schools that replied to my email, and it, worked out from there, I guess.
Sure. So was it very similar running, out there? I'd imagine it's flat like home. So was the adjustment, was it pretty similar? Was it a pretty easy, I don't know how you call it in running, as adjustment, I guess, to running out there than it is here?
Yeah.
Transition? Yeah.
It really, in terms of like the landscape and the terrain, it's not like there was, an altitude adjustment or anything like that. Late summer, early fall, it's going to be, a lot warmer out there, but we practiced early in the morning. And I think that, I'd for so long been looking forward to that jump to the next level of being surrounded by teammates that were a lot better than me, coaches that knew more than coaches that I'd ever worked with in the past. And just, on the, frontier of, what I hope to be, really big and exciting opportunities. So yeah, when you take big leaps, you expect to be pushed harder than you've been pushed before. But I'm someone that I've always, I love a challenge. I love, learning new things. So yeah, there were difficult parts of the transition as to be expected. But in general, it was hard, but a good hard. And yeah, I enjoyed the year that I spent there. For sure.
So when it comes to you, like being recruited and stuff, obviously, looking at some of the athletes that you have on your roster at Akron, there seems to be a lot of your cross country runners also do distance and, other, running events with track and field. Is that something that that makes you, I guess, special, or is that something that coaches just tend to expect that you're going to run cross country and track and field if they're going to recruit you to their school? How does that work?
Yeah. To be completely honest with, in the distance events, it's pretty much an expectation. If it's a, more middle distance runner, different coaches will have different philosophies on how. So I'll take, for example, a runner that specializes in the 800 meter on the track. It's going to be a conversation of, are you a cross country runner or not? And, the mentality behind, maybe you kind of do it just to, kind of as a fall kind of base conditioning for the speedier stuff that you're going to do on the track. But then there's coaches that at the same time, they almost don't mess with it with their middle distance runners. But anyone that, runs the 1500 on up to the longer races, it's pretty much an unspoken expectation. I think that, if you're you're recruited for track and field, and then you run cross country in addition to that. And it's not like the two, go against each other. It works with the same current, because if you want to be successful on the track at the collegiate level, then you're going to be training year round anyway. So, essentially the training that you do in the fall for cross country is what you would be needing to do if you were just preparing for a track season anyway. And, keeping the competitive and, race cows throughout the year certainly serves athletes well. So yeah, work with, all 3 seasons, don't have, much mental downtime. But it's part of it. And at this level, everybody's in it, should be in it because they love it. So it's it's the bonus that we get all 3 seasons throughout the year.
Sure. So, we talked about Tulsa, then you come back to Indiana State, you become a Sycamore. And that kind of holds a little dear to my heart too, because I went to Vincennes for 2 years. So we're just south of you a little bit.
Just down the road. Yeah.
Just down the road. Yeah. So we spent some time in Terre Haute, sometimes at Indiana State, because there's literally nothing else to do in Vincennes. So it's either that or Evansville, you took your pick. But, it wasn't that long ago. Now you're coaching Division I. Has that kind of journey been a little quicker than you thought it would be? Or was it kind of your expectation to move with the rankings pretty quick?
Honestly, it's been a whirlwind of the last few years in terms of, just the rate and the luck of the opportunities that I've had along the way. When I transferred back to Indiana State, it was the result of, a semester of being injured at Tulsa. And when I transferred back to Indiana State, it was the intent of, stepping back just enough to get the care I needed to get healthy and continue to run, and spent my sophomore year of college under coaches, head coach Angie Martin and distance coach Kyle Walsh, fighting hard for my health and for, the opportunity to get back on the track. And it didn't, pan out the way that I thought I wanted to at the time. And it was frustrating because I've already alluded to, I had big goals and high expectations for my own running career. But, looking back now, I would not redo any of the sequence of the events I experienced because, because my competitive career came to an end when it did, it kickstarted the timeline and the time frame when I was able to get into coaching. So spent the next 2 years finishing my undergraduate degree at Indiana State on staff, really just in a role where, I got hands-on experience, but I was able to learn and grow and soak up so much while I was there. And, still to this day, I'm in close contact with Angie Martin. She certainly has impacted my professional development. And I think, just my development as a person. The program at Indiana State, they've had an incredible year in both the indoor and outdoor seasons. And it's, years of planning and growth on their end with the staff that she has to work with. But yeah, so I finished my undergraduate degree coaching instead of running. So that's, rewind to high school Anna, and that's not what I anticipated. But it was a blessing in disguise, given that it, what I did at Indiana State opened the doors for the graduate assistantship and the turned into, women's distance and cross country coach at South Dakota State, where I spent 3 years. Mm-hmm. And again, an incredible experience there that, it's 3 years of my life that I'll never trade, would never trade for anything, which, the luck and the opportunities that I had there paved the way for now, the even, bigger opportunity in the role that I have at Akron. So it flew by, and I think it was just a lot of, being in the right place at the right time, and, brave enough to kind of shoot for big things. But I the same way that, I had, big goals and big visions as an athlete, I think I'm, kind of sitting in the same position as a coach, and, certainly excited for, what there is to be built and accomplish in upcoming years. And, Akron's the place I'm excited to do that.
Sure. It's funny you bring up South Dakota State. My wife ran at the University of Montana. She ran distance there. Uh-huh. And so running out there in the Mountain West is an entirely different thing. I mean, it is extremely serious from what I've learned through her and her friends who've ran. And did you kind of get that, that impression too when you were out there? I imagine you got that pretty quickly, if so, because it's something that that's near and dear to a lot of people's hearts out there.
Yeah. So it's funny that you bring that up about the University of Montana, because I think certainly just that state as a whole does have a big culture around distance running and trail running, and it bleeds over into South Dakota to some extent too. A disclaimer and an asterisk that I feel like I need to put in it is that I would more describe South Dakota State as being in the plains, in the sense that if you look at where Brookings, which is where South Dakota State is, it's on the east border of the state. So 15 minutes and you're actually in Minnesota. And the state of South Dakota is broken into East River, West River. And when you picture, the mountains and the rolling hills and all the beautiful stuff in Mount Rushmore, that's West River. East River's flat, windy, and not quite like what you picture in Montana, like I said, West River, South Dakota. But there is, for it, being just a small town in South Dakota, I think that the program itself has a rich history for distance running. A lot of that, largely, a big part of that is Rod DeHaven, the program director at South Dakota State, who has been there for 16 or 17 years now and led the program through its transition from Division II to Division I in the early 2000s. And then he himself was an athlete there in the 80s, and then multiple time All-American for the Jackrabbits. So there is a culture behind distance running and just the track and field program at South Dakota State. So it was it was an experience to be part of that. And again, I learned and grew a lot, and being part of it while I was out there.
It's got to be kind of cool, though, being one of the few people, if not the only one, to be a zebra and a jackrabbit. That's got to be pretty impressive.
If you go through my mascot resume, I have been a zebra, a golden hurricane, a sycamore, a jackrabbit, and a zip.
Okay,
I gotta ask.
Who can top that?
No, but I don't think anybody
No.
can. I get it.
I've got to ask, because this is a question AJ and we talk about fairly regularly. What is a zip? What's the story there?
Yeah, Zippy the kangaroo.
Okay, but like I was told somewhere that's just the animal that they chose, but like there's a longer history. I didn't know like if it was because of like a kangaroo at like a zoo. Like I didn't know if you had a little bit of background on that, but it just seems like a really random name pairing, a zip with a kangaroo.
I think it's because the kangaroo is named Zippy, and okay. So there. I'm sure that there is a more elaborate history, and I'm gonna have to do my research after this call, to be completely honest. I can tell the fun fact that I can add is that Zippy is a female and is one of like 2 or 3 female mascots. Mm-hmm. So we have that going for us.
Sure. Well, it's kind of like being a Hoosier too. Nobody really knows what a Hoosier is.
What is it? Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah. I mean, to me, it's somebody who goes to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway next weekend and watches the race. That's like, which I will be. I will be that person. So, like, maybe that's just it.
So let's talk about what you kind of look for in your athletes at Akron. Obviously, you talked about all these steps you took. Getting to kind of coach at Indiana State, or to be an assistant in Indiana State, to your grad degree at South Dakota State. What do you look for in your program? Do you look for specialists for cross country? Like what's kind of the thing you look for in your athletes?
Yeah, I think the thing I can't hammer home enough is that, I'm one of those coaches that's, really all about the person behind the athlete. The marks that athletes post, sometimes that's like the gateway for just formulating a general list if you're going to try to reach out to in any given recruiting cycle. But beyond that, it really comes down to the things that you uncover about a person, or an athlete, a recruit, through the recruiting process, the hours you spend on the phone with them, when you watch how they carry themselves, in the race or just at a competition in general. Because I think, to be an elite runner, to succeed in a Division I program, you've got to have some talent. But I think that sustainability and development over time, as the athletes that are passionate about the sport, are just, people of good character and of high character that, gratitude is a trait that goes a long way. A gritty work ethic is, you can't put a dollar sign on, an athlete that embodies, that. And then, I don't know, I'm outgoing. I think I've got a kind of a big personality, and those are the athletes too that are fun to work with. The people that are going to put a smile on everyone else's face every day at practice, that are going to, make the stupid jokes, you name it. I don't know. It's just your work environment is as good as you make it. And people are going to perform well in an environment where they're comfortable to be themselves and they're having fun and they're enjoying the process. So bringing bodies in the door that are going to add to that side of things. It's, when you build a culture around that, and yeah, you're working your ass off too. But it's, the combination of those things, and that's how you get results. That's how you build a successful program. So yeah, I think it comes down to, I don't necessarily chase marks when I'm recruiting. I chase people.
You talked about, finding those people here. Looking at your roster, you have Australia, the Netherlands, Kazakhstan, I think, and a lot of Ohio and Wisconsin and whatnot. Those your three runners from out of the country. Have you learned anything in particular? Maybe something different that you didn't know about running, or maybe their running style different than ours. Their competitiveness level maybe a little different. Have you learned anything in particular about that?
Yeah, I think just to speak in general, I love being. This isn't unique to the program at Akron. There's lots of programs that kind of take the route of bringing in international student athletes that have already performed at a high level. But I love the balance that it creates within the program, because generally speaking, when you're looking at the opportunities that are afforded to athletes, in various parts of Europe and Canada, is those athletes come into the college setting with a huge leg up on how to carry themselves in the high caliber environments, on the national stage, and oftentimes too, their training background is more intense coming in too. So you're bringing in people that have that edge, have that experience. And this is, I'm speaking narrowly to the running side of things right now. But, you bring in athletes that already have that, paired with athletes that, know how to live and breathe and function in Ohio and in the United States. And so, they're learning from each other and they're relying on each other, with the experience and the background that the international student athletes bring in, paired with the welcome to Ohio, and just kind of the Midwest grit that you get from athletes that you bring in locally. And yeah, I think I learned from every single athlete I work with, whether they're from 10 miles down the road or Kazakhstan. And I don't know. I think that I lost my train of thought there where I was going with this. But yeah, it's they bring a high level of experience. And it's fun just to learn, again, I've already talked about the person behind the athlete, but, their life experience and their perspective and what home is like for them, and, the changes that they are experiencing when they come here. It's fun to have a hand in that. And like I said, I learn from every person I meet. And so it's, yeah, you learn a lot from having those athletes on the team.
Sure.
It's a lot of fun.
It has to be pretty nice. So, and not being too far out of college like you are, and coaching these college kids, probably a lot of similar interests, I'd imagine. So it's probably a little easier to connect on a similar level, having a few of the same interests and watching the same shows and this, that, and the other. Have you kind of found that to be easier to kind of get to know the student athlete, because you are, not too far from their shoes?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that there's advantages and disadvantages to being as young as I am. I think it makes it a little bit easier, I think, to just create, just like you said, the communication, and just, I think, in an organic environment where people are comfortable to be themselves, to talk about anything and everything that needs to be discussed. But I think I also kind of catch myself wishing, just keep your nose down and just get a few years further down the road. Because I think sometimes from the outside looking in, I struggle a little bit to, wonder, question occasionally, being taken serious enough as a coach, or, when you're recruiting high level athletes, the years and years of experience on a resume is sometimes more convincing. And I get that. And I know that, I need to, again, just work as best as I can with what I got and have confidence in what I've accomplished up to this point. And that, there's much to look forward to and bigger things ahead in terms of, just keep doing what I'm doing and I'll have that resume 5 years from now, 10 years from now. So I don't know. I think, I just embrace where I'm at, do the best I can where I'm at, and, look for the advantages of being young and look for ways around the disadvantages that come with being young. So I don't know. I think that whether you're, 26, 36, 46, if you're doing a good job leading your athletes, and if you're doing the job you need to as their coach, then they're going to see you as their coach. So I feel like in-house, I don't have an issue with my age. It's just the bigger picture of, the challenges that come with trying to recruit high-level athletes being as young as I am. Yeah.
And I kind of wanted to touch on that a little bit. You talked about, the resume, for, coaches, speaks a little bit more in terms of recruiting. What's it like to call a giant in the sport, Sue Parks from Eastern Michigan? What's it like to sit here and call her a colleague? That has to be pretty surreal.
Sue is incredible. Everything that she's done, for the program at Eastern Michigan. I have a lot of respect for her. And I, chit chat with her, it meets throughout I think during indoor season, I didn't talk to her too much. And then, during the outdoor season, would have, good conversations with her and Paul Rinker, more and more as time went on. Same thing is, respect what others in the field have done and are doing, but I'm not really anyone that gets intimidated. Or I'm not someone who gets intimidated easily. So I think, I don't overthink, I'll toe the line against anybody, I guess. So, complete, respect where it's due. There's a lot of, really good coaches in the MAC, but I'm not intimidated by anybody, to be completely honest.
Sure. A couple of weeks ago, we had Coach Becky Burke on, the new basketball coach of Buffalo, and she played at Louisville back in the day, played basketball there. And we talked to her a little bit about being on the other side of the couch when you're talking to a coach. Now you're that coach talking to that student athlete, trying to get them to come to your school. Is the message still pretty similar to how it was when you were going through the process as a student athlete?
Yeah. I actually pretty commonly, I find myself falling back on, what resonated with me when I was going through the recruiting process, and almost trying to put myself back in those shoes, to, not just what resonated well with me, but how I perceived what was being essentially sold to me by the different coaches that I talked to. Because again, your message, your values, your vision, can be, clear as can be in your own head and even within your own program. But if you can't turn around and communicate that in a way that makes sense to 17 and 18-year-old athletes who haven't dealt with the rigors of collegiate athletics yet and are still, very green in terms of just where they're at and, life experience, then you're not going to get the most bang for your buck out of the recruiting process. So, perception and perspective is important. At the end of the day, I think, what people want, what resonates with people, that doesn't change, but making sure that you're marketing it and packaging in a way that communicates it is very important.
So let's talk NIL, let's talk transfer portal, those things that
All right.
very difficult to navigate. As I'm sure you as coaches are still trying to figure it out. We as fans and, people who love the sports, we're also trying to figure it out. So obviously the larger revenue sports such as basketball, football are going to get most of that attention for NIL and most of the attention for transfer portals. What does that look like for a cross country or track athlete? Do you see that kind of starting to happen with those athletes as well? Is there something the school is doing collaboratively to get the athletes more NIL stuff? What's that process look like with Akron?
Yeah, to speak to NIL, I think it's kind of one of those things where it's an ongoing conversation piece and figuring out, being a mid-major program, how do we keep up and how do we find those opportunities for student athletes? And when I say we, I'm talking bigger than just cross country and track and field.
Right.
And it's I think that we're definitely still in the process of just again having conversations and working our way through it. Fortunately, like you said, it's being a lower revenue sport, and just the nature of the athletes in the sport. We're not impacted by it as much as your footballs, your basketballs. And I don't know, I think you see some people doing smaller deals with I don't know, protein bars or recovery tools or whatnot on their Instagram stories, and good for them. We're not a program that's taken the reins in terms of maxing out what we can do to help create those opportunities. And to be completely honest, I would be lying if I said I knew every rule of the do's and don'ts with it. There's just, because we're a sport that's impacted by it less than if I was a football coach on here, then I would need to know everything about it and what we're doing with it. So I don't know, I guess I'll take the grace that comes with just being a track coach or just being a cross country coach as far as NIL goes. And to speak to the transfer portal again, I think certainly don't deal with the same struggles that the footballs and the basketballs do with athlete retention or avoiding issues there. But it's you win some, you lose some. It's an athlete goes on the portal from your program, but then at the same time, it's been actually a helpful recruiting tool for me personally this year, given the start date of my position here was middle of September, middle of cross country season. So when you're looking at the graduating class of 2022, a lot of the top athletes had already, if not made their decision by the time I started at Akron, they had it narrowed down to a list of 2 or 3 schools and weren't really open to new conversations right from that point anyway. And even if they were, well, I kind of had to figure out where I was and what I was selling before I was ready to, really make a difference on the phone with some of the athletes that I did have contact with last fall. So, saving grace for this year's recruiting class kind of has been the transfer portal. With getting finding some prospective student athletes off that. So I think the bottom line is, yes, collegiate athletics is changing, whether it's for the worse or for the better, and depending on who you're talking to, or exactly what component is being brought to discussion. But like everything else, if you want to succeed, you figure out how to navigate within it, around it, whatever it is. And complaining about it certainly doesn't help anything. So
Sure. We've Alex and I have been lucky to have a few coaches on who were former athletes in the conference, and we've asked them the same question I'm going to ask you: is if you could have endorsed a product while you were competing, what would it have been?
What would it have been?
So Coach Tom Hammock from NIU said Buffalo Wild Wings, and Becky Burke said she wore a headband while she played. She said something with headbands.
Those are all good. Well, gosh, I don't want to sound like a cop out, but the thing that comes to mind is on our team, one of our guys, are 2 big things that we're trying to get. We say sponsored by, because we're not necessarily talking about NIL. Is Nature Valley granola bars, or the Bobo's oat bars. We eat a lot of those. We're big on those, and it has to do with Blake Lucius has a gluten allergy, and those products are gluten free. So I know that for our group right now, we're really hoping that we can strike some kind of deal with one of those companies. So stay tuned. Maybe there. What would mine have been? Gosh, I don't know. I'm just thinking about Nature Valley granola bars now. That's what we're really working at with our current program.
Right. I think like the common answer probably has to be something food related, right? I mean, we've all been college kids. We all know food is still gold.
Yes. We're distance runners. We eat a lot.
Right. I mean, I live with a distance runner. I get it. So I get that absolutely.
You mentioned getting. I was actually going to bring it back to this. You mentioned coming in the middle of cross country season. So you talked about coming in the middle of September. Were you there for the All Ohio championships, or were you hired after that? Like you weren't there for the Tommy Evans, were you?
No,
Okay.
after. It was I think the week after All Ohio.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
That's crazy.
sink or swim. No, it was the I came in and I was very fortunate that the group of women that were in season and done an excellent job with minimal guidance over the summer, and just running the mileage that needed to be run, keeping themselves healthy. And then when they got back to campus, head coach, Coach Mitchell did a great job, kind of carrying the torch until I was brought in and officially able to start with the group. But it was you just had to pick up the group where they were at, and so it was just as quick as possible taking inventory on where goals were set for the season, what their training resume had looked like up to that point, and playing it. I don't want to say safe, but I think it was it was more again, I think the simplest way to put it is you had to just coach them where they were at through the season. And we got lucky in the sense that all of the heavy hitters and the women that were going to contribute to the scoring finishes at the meets we went to were all healthy and running really well. And I was I think I was able to connect with most of them pretty quickly, and certainly able to connect with the team's goals and the sentiment that they had on what they wanted to get done through the rest of the season. So I think that's a given. Have to give them full credit and props for through the uncertainty that they dealt with over the summer, still staying kind of nose to the grindstone and getting the work done and preparing themselves for the season ahead. And then their willingness to just adapt to what I came in and started throwing at them. And so finished well at MAC, finished well at the regional meet, and performed well at the invitationals that we ran at along the way. So yeah, it was a whirlwind, crazy time to start, but at the same time, I like a little bit of chaos, so wanted it any other way, I guess.
Sure. Let's talk a little bit about some of those meets, the outdoor championships, the women came across champions. You had great PRs in men and women's distance. You had a first, you had a third, a bunch of top 10 finishes. Let's talk a little bit about that meet, some of the things that how proud you were of your team. I saw it on your Instagram. That was a great post, a lot of success on that team. And I'm sure you're really excited to take that into the next season.
Yeah. We did some cool things. We didn't do all the things that we wanted to do. A couple of close but no cigar type things were like Alyssa Thomas's 5K out at Brian Clay when the weekend we went to California. Is she PR'd by a total of like 40 seconds or something like that over the course of the season from her previous 5K mark. But finished the season 0.09 off of the school record in the 5K. So it's kind of one of those things where, and she didn't quite. We had the goal of qualifying for the preliminary round of nationals, and we didn't quite get there. So there's certainly things that it's a great success story if you look at the improvement and development that she experienced this year. Just like we didn't quite get it all. But to speak to some of the highs, during the indoor season, really all this year, the 800 group has been on a roll with. I think that that's the event area where we had the most success. Between especially between if you're looking at both genders combined, and I think if you just look at on paper of this is how fast the women's 800 group ran, this is how fast the men's 800 group ran, it's decently impressive. But I think the stories and the narratives behind those outcomes is what's really incredible is a lot of athletes that had been through a lot of ups and downs in this up to this point in their collegiate career with mental health struggles, physical injuries, and so just the special there's a special type of purpose and a special reward that comes behind not just running fast, but knowing that some of these athletes kind of had been to hell and back to get to where they were on the track this year. So yeah, the and I don't know, 800 runners are kind of crazy, so they're just fun to work with in general. So yeah, the 800 group, hats off to their performances and how consistently strong too they were across the course of the year. And then, already mentioned Alyssa Thomas, but, her story and her development, she's another one that dealt with a lot of setbacks, a lot of injuries throughout the course of her collegiate career. And this was her last year, her last seasons of eligibility. And I think that she gained a lot of confidence and belief in herself during the cross country season, because she, ran marks she'd never seen before, placed higher than she ever had in the cross country setting, and then had to, kind of wait patiently because she was out of indoor eligibility. So she, ran a couple of races unattached, but essentially was just in, head down training mode throughout the indoor season. And then, finally got her turn to come out and do some big things on the track. So, number 2, graduating, number 2 all time at Akron in the 5K and in the 10K. And then her, she had to race tough at the outdoor conference meet on, Thursday, day 1, to go and run a lifetime best and place 6 in the 10K. And you cross the finish line and know that less than 48 hours later, you're going to be putting your mind and your body on the line, trying to do the same thing in the 5K. And she handled it as well as anybody I've ever worked with, and came back and placed 5th in the 5K. Like I said, less than 48 hours later. So it's an incredible feat when you have athletes that can, not just make it through a 10K and score, but then come back less than 2 days later and do the same thing in the 5K. So, she didn't reach all of her goals this season, but she came a long way and has just a lot to be proud of, looking at how, lucky she was. And I don't want to say lucky, it's because she worked really hard to stay in tune with her body, but, staying healthy the entire year. And then the performances that came along with it was the result of her setting big goals, but also just being able to train extremely consistently throughout the course of the year.
Mm-hmm.
And there's others, Jake Ondashed, and, wasn't even going to come back this year, and does, and, runs, has the best year of his running career. And then, Blake Lucius, our, top middle distance athlete, heartbreaking into his season. He's, he was a preliminary round qualifier. We found out today, confirmed that he has an navicular stress fracture in his foot. So, certainly, heartbreaking way to end the season for him. But, the year he had and the impact he has on the program up to this point, he still can walk away feeling good about all that he's done, and he still has 2 years left. So we'll get him where he wants to go. It's just unfortunate that we don't get to finish out this year the way we'd hoped.
Sure. Now, you guys, I've seen your schedule. You get to travel across the country, go to Texas and West Virginia, all these cool spots. Are you able to, kind of walk the track, check it out, kind of see what you're feeling, what you're not? Because I assume every track is not the same. Same thing across country. Every track isn't the same. Every course isn't the same. Are you able to take time out and just go check it out, see where you're liking, where you're not, where you might need to make an adjustment, things like that?
Yeah. Obviously, when especially when it's meets that you fly to, you're a little bit at the mercy of, your travel schedule versus the meet schedule. And, I'm a planner, I'm an organizer. I like, people to know what's going on, and just, if you want athletes to perform at a high level, you need to make sure that you have all your ducks in a row and set up travel to meets in a way that's going to, promote them being able to perform well. And a big part of that is, gaining some familiarity, and, thinking through different components that are going to come into play, whatever venue you're at. So it's nice when you go to venues that you've been to before, but, I think kind of have, a loose checklist of things that we're mindful of when we go to a new place, and, like to go there the day before when possible for, our pre-meet practice, just to, like you said, get a feel for the track, know what's, similar to, tracks that we've run on, what's different. And I don't know, just like simple little things like, establishing the day before, okay, this is where team camp's going to be. This is where the check-in tent's going to be. They want you at the start line X minutes before your race, so that, nobody's, when we show up and we're at the meet, we're ready to compete. We know what we're there to do. I think it helps streamline everything when they're not lost when we get there for the meet. So we set ourselves down at team camp. I'm going to go out for a warm up at this time. I'm going to check it before, again, just having, walked through all those variables from the time that you get to a meet to when the gun goes off is, in my opinion, just as important as the race strategy that you create for the few minutes that you're, actually out there doing it. Anyway, so yeah, it's fun, and it's, you talk to different athletes, on every trip we go on. Like when we went out to California, had an athlete that it was the first time on an airplane, and lots of others that it was their first time going to California. So yeah, just, it's exciting when we go to those meets because it's big competition and big opportunities to run fast. But then, the quality of the experience that, supports the time spent on the track. It's an important part of the process for the athletes too. So yeah.
Oh,
Have you coached at any of the track or the events that you ran, or will you eventually?
Yeah. So, as I, mentioned earlier, my collegiate competitive career was quite short. But it's fun, taking athletes to tracks that if I haven't ran at, that I've coached at before, when you know the restaurants that are close by that you want to take people to, or the sightseeing things that you want to do while you're on the trip because you've been there before. There's something kind of cool about that. But like I mentioned earlier, I raced at the track at Indiana University, and so taking a group of athletes there was special. And so whether you've been there as a coach or been there as an athlete, there is something kind of extra special about the trips that you go on when it's going to somewhere that's familiar to you, and you're sharing a part of your past with your current group of athletes, and that's its own special feeling.
Sure.
Yeah.
Take them to Bloomington, go to Mother Bears after, smashing pizzas, and have yourself a day.
Yeah, we didn't make it to Mother Bears, unfortunately, but I wish. God, I wish.
A good spot.
It is.
So I want to ask you a question. We ask every coach, every athlete, every player that we've had on the show. I mean, I think we even asked the commissioner this when we spoke with him at Media Day. So I'll ask you, what does it mean to you to coach in the Mid-American Conference?
I think that I was drawn largely to Akron because I was first drawn to the MAC, to be completely honest. That's not a bluff answer. Is, if you look at the depth, I love how many schools are in the MAC, and then the depth of, especially the distance events in the MAC. So if you want to not just keep your head above water, but to succeed, you have to have damn good athletes and a damn good program to do it. So, I like kind of, the grit and the edge that comes with being, a successful mid-major program, and not having all the lights and the shiny things that you see at the the Power 5 programs. Again, good for those schools for having that that experience to offer. But I like the grit that comes with being at a mid-major program, and I like the fact that if you want to succeed in the MAC, you have to be really, really good, and you have to have really good athletes, and you have to pour everything you have into it. So it's a special opportunity. Akron is a special opportunity, and bigger than that, the opportunity to compete, against the other coaches and programs in the MAC. It's its own special opportunity too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Alex and I are both MAC guys. He's a Toledo guy. I'm a Ball State guy. So it's one of those things, kind of same thing that kind of drew us to doing our podcast is just the Mid-American Conference. That mid-major is just the best. It's so fun. We talked about at the beginning of the show, it's such a small world, especially in this conference being, such, 4 or 5 different states. Here you are, here we grew up 10 minutes away from each other. So, it's pretty cool to be a part of a conference like this.
Yeah, I would agree.
So AJ, did you have anything else?
That is it for me.
We Coach's brain about.
That is it for me. We took up an hour of Coach's time. We don't want to take up any more. I'm sure we can do this again sometime. But this was a lot of fun learning about a sport that I'm pretty unfamiliar with. I just know it through my wife and then Coach Adrian Myers, who we had on 2 years ago or so from NIU. He's at Tulane now. He was at one of our first conversations about the track and field and cross country. And then, I've learned a lot about it with my wife. I still won't run, but I'll watch her run, and we'll keep it at that.
Fair enough. Well, yeah, hopefully I didn't, ramble and share too much, unsolicited information, but
no, not at all.
It was,
this is what we love talking to coaches like you who don't get the recognition they deserve, the programs that need the light shined on. It's fun to talk to those coaches and those athletes because we learn a lot and our listeners learn a lot more. So it works out well.
Yeah, thank you for, what you guys do, for the different coaches in the conference, for the conference in general. And I appreciated the time and the opportunity.
Absolutely. Well, if you get back to the blueberry stomp, let me know. I'll stand on the sidewalk with my coffee and cheer you on.
Okay. This September, I'll sign myself up now.
Perfect.
Cool. Well, thank you, Coach, for coming on. We definitely appreciate your time, and we look forward to coming out and seeing you guys compete later on this year. Like AJ said, I live in Toledo. I'm a Toledo guy, so anytime you guys are up here or in the area, give us a shout. We'll make it out. We'll try to do a little meet and greet after the event. So
good stuff. Good stuff. We'll do. Thank you.
cool. Thank you so much, Coach.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. We really appreciate it. Great conversation with Coach here. And AJ, I learned a lot more about this sport than I did the last time we had Adrian Myers on the show.
Every show we learn a little bit more. It helps us out for sure.
So cool. AJ, anything else you wanted to give our listeners at home?
That's it for me, man.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we will see you next week.